Cohasset, and welcome to another edition of Our Town. I'm Mark DeGiacomo, and she's Pat Martin.
Hi, how are you?
Now, as you probably have heard around town, we have elections and a town meeting coming up very soon.
Looks like it's going to be a hot election season with 5 candidates running for 2 seats on the Board of Selectmen. Quite a diverse group coming out to shape up for an election of the size of which we haven't seen in a long time. Probably not since I ran, because every time I ran, then a million people had to run against me. But but it looks like it's going to be an interesting race.
Well, we also have the town meeting, as I said, coming up,
Yep.
and there are several articles that should produce quite a bit of debate and discussion. So we've got the two of them. They're not right next to each other, but they are both coming up and certainly have been the topic of a lot of discussion around town.
Which also includes a lot of discussions about maybe things that aren't necessarily on paper or in the articles, but still seem to be capturing people's attentions and comments in the paper or whatever venue. So I'm sure that'll be coming out too.
Right. And so we're going to be very busy over the next month. Mike Milanoski, acting town manager, is in tonight primarily to talk to us about some of the articles on the warrant that's coming up. And then we'll be doing interviews with each of the candidates for selectmen and for school committee.
That's correct. And then, of course, we'll be doing our annual debate. This debate will focus on the only contested race, which is the Board of Selectmen. So we'll be doing that, which I think we have done almost every year since 2004.
Right. We'll be filming that right now. We're hoping for the 25th of April.
Right.
And the debate, as well as tonight's show with Mike, as well, and all of the candidate interviews, will be on almost an endless loop on a local access TV station.
That's right. You can watch it several times as it airs over our channels, or you can go to the website, pick the show that you want to watch, and watch it there.
Absolutely. And do remember that on the website, through Pat's hard work and Dawn's hard work, you can look at us anytime you want, any day.
Yeah,
So,
in case you can't get to sleep.
It can't get any better than that. But anyway, tonight's topic is the town meeting coming up, and we'll be right back with acting town manager Mike Milanoski.
When some people struggle with their mortgage payments, they become frozen. But the people who take action are far more likely to get the most positive outcome. Call this free government program for the option that's right for you.
And welcome back. And with us is Mike Milanoski, Cohasset's acting town manager. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on the show. So I want to start off with questions about the warrant. Just to give people a heads up, we're going to have a special town meeting. In case you didn't remember from last year's vote, we'll be on a Monday night, April 22nd. Hope to get through all business that night, but if not, they would be going a second night on the 23rd. So be sure you're paying attention to the Monday-Tuesday schedule. Be here at the high school. But with the warrant, I think a lot of people think about the spending of money and the creations of budgets. Can you start us off there? Tell us about the operating budget that you'll be putting forward for the town and what's in it.
Sure. This year we adopted, or I should say actually last year, the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committees, the Advisory and the Capital Budget Committee, adopted a new budget process that would allow us to do a more in-depth analysis of what the needs are of the town. And that process actually started back in September. And back at that point, we met with the Budget Planning Committee and forecast the revenues that we anticipated would be available this year to be used by the town and also by the schools to run our community. And as part of that, this policy followed what town meeting had also approved at Article 1 at last year's annual town meeting, which was to set up the financial management policies that required us to spend within our means, make sure that we use one-time capital costs or one-time money for one-time costs, so we don't put that into an operating budget if it's not going to be there next year. And as a result of that, through this analysis, we came back with that the town side of the budget was going to be $10,024,500, which is what we would need to operate public safety, town hall, the harbor master, DPW, and everything on the town side of the budget. So that's when it started as phase one of the budget process, again back in the fall, which is where we come up with the revenue forecast that we're going to have. And that incorporates new tax revenue, new growth, Prop 2.5, state revenue that comes in, and local fees and assessments that we do. Following that, in the late November through December and into early January, all of the individual departments actually put in their requests as to what they were going to need to maintain the services they had today. So baseline is every service that's in town right now will continue as it is. And some departments put in requests for some additional services that the community has looked for. So through that process of in December and in the tail end of January, then I then submitted the town manager's proposed budget to the Board of Selectmen in late January. And that's what really starts off phase 3 of the budget process, which then after the Board of Selectmen are introduced to the budget, introduced to the org plan, introduced to the new job descriptions and what the priorities are of the budget, then that goes to the advisory committee, where they then spend 2.5 months with multiple public meetings going through that budget process. Feedback from them, multiple members, is that this is the most professionally done budget they've seen ever here in the town of Cohasset. It was very transparent. All of the issues were laid out. It was balanced within the budget, and they were very pleased with the process. They voted unanimously to support the budget, and then from there, then it goes back to the Board of Selectmen, which is where we've been for the last 2 weeks, where the Board of Selectmen actually come in and look at their recommendations and can accept them, they can reject them, or they can modify them. And that's where we are right now, is the Board of Selectmen, after going through all this vetting, is now putting in its review of the budget. And that's where we stand right now.
Okay, so do you have a bottom line budget figure at this time that you'll be putting forward?
Yes, that figure is $10,240,500 for the town side of the budget. The school side of the budget is $16.2 million, and then we have shared budget expenses that are about $9 million. On top of that, we are also going to be putting in $50,000 into our unfunded unfunded healthcare liability, which is the OPED that people have heard me talk about, where we owe as a community $34 million for retirees and current employees' future health care. And we have to start to tackle that, and that was one of our financial management policies. In addition to that, we're putting in $250,000 into our capital, into our stabilization account, and then another almost $700,000 into our capital account, where we're trying to get into the position where we can buy more items out of cash than it is to go out and borrow for trucks and vehicles and other, capital equipment we have in town.
Now, you said the selectmen right now are going through that process, and it seems like there was a lot of very late, long meetings. You actually have agenda items scheduled at midnight or after. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Are things just too compacted? Are we trying to do? That just seems, while meetings can certainly go late, to actually schedule things that late seems a little unusual.
A lot of processing.
Yeah, this was the first year we actually fully implemented the budget process the Board of Selectmen adopted. So whenever you're doing a new process, there are some, people have to know new ways of doing things. So the way it's been set up is that it goes through all these independent reviews before it comes back to the Board of Selectmen. And where it's been vetted by all these other agencies and committees, it has not been as vetted as much with the Board of Selectmen, although they had the same budget in January. And again, now we're in beginning of April now, finalizing this. There was ample time to go through the reviews as the advisory committee did. What we also did this year is we actually laid out a schedule day by day as to when all the meetings would be, starting back in December when we had final budget approval from the Budget Planning Committee, and laid out all the dates, knowing when town meeting was and backing the dates out. So the schedule has been dictated for a long time. I think it's part of it is just people just getting accustomed to what the budget is. There are a lot of rumors that are out there, and I think that when you have rumors, when you're in the middle of negotiating with union contracts, things get exaggerated. The old telephone tree story, one person says one thing, by the time the 10th person has it, we're succeeding in moving down to Duxbury, which none of those things are true. So, you know, again, I would summarize it this is the schedule was dictated back in December what it would be up through town meeting on a day-by-day basis. The budget process was followed as approved by the Board of Selectmen. And, you know, there's just a lot of things that we had to tackle here as a community because of some of the financial chaos we've had in the past.
So you're happy with the way things have been spread out for this year? Or do you think that next year and the years following, when we continue to do the same thing, maybe it won't be quite as crazy midnight oil at the end? Or is that just the way it's got to be?
I think on one hand, it's the way it just is. You know, I don't think extending the schedule is going to change things. I think maybe having an additional step back in January when the Board of Selectmen received the budget, that they take a few meetings to discuss it before they send it off to the advisory committee. That would have helped resolve some issues. But again, the budget that was submitted to them is you know, 99.9% the same that it is right now, except for some changes we made over the last week.
So aside from the process, is there an increase? What's the increase percentage of both of the budgets from last year?
The increased percentage of the budget from last year, I think for the town side is 1.45%, I think is the number I have. And let me just double check on that.
1.4.
It is
Pretty small.
1.77% increase on the town side. Now, part of that is that a lot of this gets eaten up by shared costs, which is not part of that money, which would be health care and pension liability and those things. And the school's cost is just slightly above that compared to the towns. But again, the 1.77% is a small number compared to what town meeting appropriated.
So Article 5 divvies up a lot of the free cash. First of all, what is the free cash position at this point?
The free cash position is over $900,000 that we had from last year.
And
Now,
is that due to Avalon, or I know there's a lot of things factor in it, but what are the big?
let me hit the highlights.
Yeah.
As you know, last year when I took over this position on a 2-week basis, we were running a deficit around $600,000. By the time we ended the fiscal year, we were running in the black by about $15,000, $16,000. So we were able to turn a negative into a positive in 4 months. Following that, what we also did before we closed out the end of the year is we looked at some of the assets we had in town. The town owned a house on Jerusalem Road down near Hall. There's no need for the town to own a residential property that it was letting people live there free rent and still paying the utilities. So we then, and what I did is I said, let's go out and sell that. I got the Board of Selectmen's approval. We unloaded that.
Did a nice job too.
Thank you. So there's a few $100,000 that comes in. We also had higher collections that were anticipated due to Avalon actually moving faster on their process. We had higher collections going back for tax title stuff than were projected. So it was those type of avenues and a little bit of state extra revenue that came in. So when you look at those 4 items, those were the key items that actually added up to the $900 and I think it was $83,000, which is a stellar year for free cash. We never normally have that amount, and that's why with this article you're talking about Article 5 is to reinvest that back into one-time capital cost.
A little over half will be going into the stabilization fund.
Correct.
Where does the stabilization fund sit right now?
By the end, with town meeting's approval of this, the 2 articles that have to do with stabilization, we should have about $1.3 million in the stabilization account.
Is that where you think it should be?
No, we really need to get up to about a $1.8 million number based upon what the bond rating agencies are requesting us to do for our caliber community. But compared to coming back with the, $50,000 in there, we've made a lot of progress in a year of building that up, and that's part of being sound financial management is making sure you have that rainy day fund should something happen. So we've made a real focus on trying to invest in that.
So an article, so it would be Article 7 of the Capital Stabilization Fund. Is that also what you're talking about is the initiatives that you wanted to do? Is that included in the budget, or is that a separate vote?
That's a separate vote,
Okay.
and we have a capital budget committee where I, as the town manager, go out and put together a 5-year projection on what our capital needs are in the community, and then prioritize those based upon funding. This year, we're going to be spending over $800,000 to purchase new equipment, from an ambulance, a dump truck, to generators that we had to experience, during Nemo and other hurricane issues.
Right, and one that I want to be sure, because a lot of people are excited if they think that the high school gym roof air handler repair will solve the problem of water leaking on the basketball courts. Is that going to do that?
That's where that money's going to go, is to fix
Excellent.
those repairs.
Excellent.
Plus, what we've been able to do too is put a lot of money into technology. We have a new chief technology officer, which is a shared position between the town and the schools. That individual has put together a plan for how we need to address moving forward, because this town did not invest in its infrastructure, whether it's computer, software, or even training its employees in the past. And that's one of the key initiatives that I put forward, is we need to invest in ourselves if we're going to succeed, as we move forward. We had many computers in this building that were 10, 12 years old. We're coming through and wholesale replacing those and getting out there with the approval of these. We've already funded 2 labs that have just been replaced. Again, 12, 14-year-old computers are gone. Now we have all state-of-the-art LCD monitors, and what's interesting is the monitors, compared to the big box monitors we had right now, pay for themselves in 2 years, compared to just the energy cost from the ones before.
You mentioned the bond rating. Remind me where we are at now.
Yes, we are AA+ right now. Our goal, based upon our financial plans, is to get up to a AAA. We are making all the appropriate steps to get there, and one of them is building up our stabilization, another is dealing with our unfunded liability, another is investing in our infrastructure, and building the management team and the structure to make sure that we can run ourselves, as I like to say, a socially responsible business.
And that would be the highest rating
That is the highest rating.
available, which would mean that our borrowing costs would be lowest possible.
Correct.
Which is what it's all about at the end of the day.
It's what it's all about, and the bond rating is really the independent review to see if financially you're managing yourself well.
You've mentioned the OPED trust funds, and I know this is a big issue that you're concerned about, the 34 million. After this town meeting, if everything gets voted in, what kind of monies are would be set aside?
Well, we have $50,000 from one article and another $100,000 from another article that's putting money into that. Again, so there's 150. I think we have another 180 in there, so we'll be a little over $300,000 in there. 1% of what we really need to have, but we have to start to address it. And this is our steps to say, everybody, hello, let me get the megaphone. You have a problem. We have a problem as taxpayers. We need to address this. We can't afford our employees, when they retire, and current employees, to pay their health care in the future based upon current cost increases.
But just to be clear, because people don't freak out, we don't need $34 million in that account, because everybody isn't going to retire all at the same time, right?
That's correct.
So what do you feel, based on your experience and I'm sure you've looked at this with other communities, and this is a problem for every town, every city, every state in the country, right?
That's correct.
What do you feel the bonding company, because at the end of the day they're the ones, I guess, what do they like to see? What kind of a percentage based on again, understanding people retire over time?
Yes, and that's a good point. It's not 34 million is due today. That's what our unfunded liability is when you extrapolate this out. What we need to be putting away right now is about $1 million, a little over $1 million a year, in order to meet that future obligation. Right now, we're paying it out of our operating budget, so we don't have any reserves built up to start to draw that on the long term. What our bonding rate agencies are looking for is a plan, and following the plan and starting to put money into it. It has to be a realistic plan, starting to invest money into it. One of the things that I've talked about with the Board of Selectmen is any type of savings that we can do with our health care, particularly with the employees, is that we take those savings and we automatically put that into our OPED fund versus putting it into our operating base. It's let's take those savings and start to plow those out. So the bonding rating companies realize we don't have $34, $36 million today to put in there, but they want us to start to go in that direction. And if you really go back 15 years, when towns had these unfunded pension liabilities, and then you had legislation that was passed that required towns to start to fund those over a 30-year period. That's kind of where we are at this point on healthcare.
But we're not going to be in a position to put $1 million in every year.
We are not in the next couple of years, no. No, but we have to build up to that, yes.
You think that is a realistic goal?
I think it has to be a realistic goal, because the state has its own issues. They're not going to come in and bail us out. The feds have their own issues with, OPED issues, and the towns actually, when you look at it, the towns have more of a liability than the state does, given all the employees in the municipalities versus the state government. So, as I've said to many people, we have to figure out how to solve this problem on our own. No one's going to come by and actually fund this for us.
So is that somehow then related to the intent of Article 10? Explain what this means when it says recession of authorized but unissued debt, and we're looking to rescind balances. Does that mean money's coming back into this? What are these about?
Okay, that's a very good article, and it really ties into our bond rating, is that the town over, and going back to 1999, this is part of cleaning up our financial house, if you will. The selectmen basically have a credit card for $11 million. Town meetings authorize $11 million of borrowing. For whatever reason, these projects haven't gone forward. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we're going to give that credit limit back. We're going to eliminate that credit limit, so we no longer have an $11 million credit limit. So that's what these items are. These are projects going back from 1999. They were never implemented, never finished through one of many different reasons, and we're now taking those off the books.
So they were never finished. It's not projects that have been, we borrowed and they've been paid down, so now there's a gap between what was originally authorized and what's owed. It's not that. It's just these things, like, I guess I'm looking at the biggest one, land acquisition, Sawyer Street.
Yep.
Back in November of 2003.
That was
$4.1 million. I'm trying to remember that. I should remember that, but.
Cook Estates.
Oh, of course, the Cook Estates. Remember that very well.
So
okay.
there was authorization to buy the Cook Estates
okay.
under this, and
I was thinking down further. Okay.
And then the MBTA, was that when there was thoughts that there would be maybe a stop behind the library? It says Sawyer Street?
that was for wetlands replication and redoing the whole James Brook.
Okay.
And the library, 3.25 back in '01. So some repairs were going to be done to the Pratt building, but instead it moved.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
So again, this is cleaning up our financial house.
The article right before that, Article 9, seeks approval of union contracts.
Yes.
When last we spoke, as you recalled earlier, several contracts were still in the process of being negotiated, and we were actually past the expiration date of the previous contract and going forward. But now I'm sure you're happy and perhaps thrilled to report that all the union contracts have been agreed to by all sides and are in place. Is that
We
true?
had the school contract that had expired, the fire contract, the clerical, and the library contract that had all expired last year or this current year, and then we had the police, which was going to expire at the end of this year. I will say that having all of those together has been probably spent hundreds of hours on all of them combined. But we're at a point right now where this was a difficult negotiation, because part of getting our financial house in order is determining what we can afford going forward. And give you an example, we had one department that was receiving 28 days vacation. If we go to our budding towns, they would receive 16 or 20 days vacation. So when you're looking at our labor market, where benefits are far and above what our competing communities are. And then when you start to amortize what the cost of those extra days are when you have to bring people in for overtime, you're looking at $8,000 potentially per individual for those extra 8 days compared to this. So the unions, and it was a very tense, and there's still some collateral damage from negotiating all these union contracts, but the majority of them gave up significant benefits to the communities. For instance, on future hires, some unions gave up 5 days for future hires at the top of the scale. Some gave up 7 days vacation for future hires. Some gave up from 15 sick days per year to having 13 sick days per year. So there were a lot of givebacks that actually allow us, when we have new employees, to be able to better manage our finances going forward. And at the same time, the town, as proposed here, provided a 2% increase for FY13, a 2% increase for FY14, and a 2.5% increase for FY15. And again, many may say that's a big number, but we also received, some benefits back from the unions. But I will tell you, when you got down to the last union or two, it gets very tense, and people start talking. And then we get into the whole telephone conversation where things get blown out of proportion, stories get made up, trying to negotiate in the press. Right. And when you negotiate a union contract in the press, no one wins. It's bloody, it's messy, it should not happen. But the good news is we're past that. We've all shaken hands, moved forward, and we have a good agreement on both sides that, by the way, neither one's happy with, which really means we've negotiated well.
That's right, that's right. Talk though about the confusion that happened at when the school committee voted in and you weren't initially invited, or they didn't seem to know that you had a vote along with them, and talk about that issue, because that seemed like that blew up and left a lot of people guessing what happened.
Yeah, I think that was I don't think that was blown up out of proportion. I was involved in the negotiations with the school committee. I meet with them in executive session, and had my concerns, what we were looking at. When they finally made their public vote, I had voted in executive session, which we all did, and then we had to re-vote in open session. I think the chairman just didn't realize that I was sitting there, and when I said, I get to vote in this too, I think it was just a little confusion. I don't think there was much beyond that, because again, I was participating behind the scenes, and I think that was just a circumstance issue than anything beyond that. So I wouldn't read too much into that.
So you voted in favor of the contract?
I did. No, I actually voted against the teacher's contract.
Okay, and what did you feel is missing, or what was given?
One of the things that I addressed was two things. One is, in some of the analysis that was ran by the business manager, and these numbers do change, is that there appeared there would be a deficit in year 3 based upon the projections of what the town could afford going forward. So we needed to address that. And I think the other thing was that when we started to compare the elementary, the middle school teachers, and then compare those to the high school teachers who have the open campus and don't teach a full day, it seemed that comparing them to other communities that they should have been teaching an extra class just to fill out the day, or closer to filling out the day, like peer communities were doing in the high school realm. And that was one of the things we looked at, was trying to change that. We ended up getting more teaching time across the whole district, but I felt that the need was in the high school, again, based upon peer schools and everything. And our teachers do a wonderful job, don't get me wrong, and I support everything they're doing. My kids are in this district, and they do a fabulous job. But it's also looking at the future, and when you're comparing like communities and you're comparing like positions, and you see a discrepancy, just like I mentioned on the vacation time, 28 days for ours, 16 days for another community, it makes you go, there's something we need to look at a little bit more there.
Now you said, an executive session with the school committee. Were you ever at the negotiating table with the teachers?
I was invited to observe a couple times.
Okay,
but I wasn't part of the negotiating team. Okay. Under the Town Manager Act, actually under Mass General Laws, the town manager is the 6th member of a school committee during negotiations. Right. Now, the school committee has to vote whether I'm on the negotiating team, which actually goes and negotiates, but I do get one of the 6 votes.
So they voted you no, not on the team?
Yes, I guess you could say that, yeah.
Okay, all right. But you voted against it, but it sounds like it is what it is, and you're satisfied. You're not up on a soapbox yelling and screaming about it.
No, just made a point that we need to look at this, and the next year, hopefully it'll be addressed a little bit better.
Okay. To talk about Article 12, it's a big article with many sections. You got 5, 7, 8. You got lots and lots of sections, and it's giving enabling home rule petition to create sewer districts. Talk about that. Is this something that might lead to a lot of growth? Are we giving developers chances to make their own? Explain it to me.
No, I would say it's actually the opposite of that. Is it actually controls growth, because the sewer district, with the approval of town meeting, can establish districts where it wants a focus based upon environmental needs and other needs to run sewer in certain areas. So as we finish the Little Harbor District and we reassess the plant and reassess the capacity of the plant, it allows us to start to look at the sewer commission, with approval of town meeting, to start to define particular areas where it wants to, again, run new sewer to, with the focus of really trying to solve environmental issues.
Okay, which is a good thing, because I think a lot of people felt like, wow, those 2 sewer projects, we had to do them. They cost a lot of money. We satisfied the state, and that'd be the end of sewers. But you're saying we'll be taking on our own initiative as a town to identify our own areas, it sounds like, right? To sewer and correct issues.
Sure. The issue is when you have a plant, then unless you have a plan and set up districts, then other people can connect to your plant. This is a way of having the sewer commission take the lead in determining where it wants growth to go versus, and when I say growth, I'm saying really cleaning up the environment where you have, septic systems and so forth, and have them put onto the system versus just additional growth happening.
Isn't the system at capacity now?
That's what the analysis is also looking at, and there may be some limited additional capacity.
Article 8, I think I've heard a little something about this around town.
Oh, yes. Yeah, this is a long article.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously in the current draft, we don't see too much. Will the proposed changes be in the warrant, or will it actually be in the?
They were actually inserted today.
Okay.
And so I'm up to version 9, you have version 8.
I'm at 8.0, right,
And,
okay.
Version 9 has the actual text into the article. That will be mailed home to every resident, every household. And this is an article where the governance committee has spent probably 30-40 meetings going over the pros and cons of our form of government and trying to address where their issues are. And they've gone through this thing with a scalpel and figured out where there's problems, where there's ambiguity, and have tried to straighten it out. It's the first part. This is the key piece, because this becomes the new enabling legislation for the town, is how it's governed. And then once this is approved, then the governance committee would go back and then start to modify bylaws based upon the new Mass General Law, which creates our organizational
Well, so
government.
as you say, we don't have the language right now, but we all remember well the most recent town meeting when the decision was made, good or bad, to go forward with just the one little piece, which would enable you to apply for a full-time town manager and people in the future, obviously, too. And that was voted down, and a lot of people felt that, well, I don't know, I won't speak for everybody on what they felt, but at least the thought was maybe that some people just didn't like the one piece coming forward. They wanted the fuller. And this will now be the fuller version of the changes. But that change is still in it.
That change is still in there. There's a selection process that's built into it. This is a real comprehensive analysis and changes to the existing Town Manager Act.
And is this all about the town manager, or does this get into the other big issues about whether we should have some of our elected boards should be appointed and so forth, or is that left for later on?
That's left for later on. There are no changes to any other elected board, but it is a comprehensive, analysis of multiple changes that need to be happening throughout the town structure. So it's not just one item. There's probably 22 major areas where there's improvement that's been identified.
Mike, is this vote on this going to be a referendum on you?
Whether it's a referendum on me, it's something the town really needs to look at, is to figure out what's the best form of government. I don't anticipate myself being here too much longer. I think I've been able to do what I planned to accomplish after 2 weeks, is moving the community from the financial chaos that we had to a very, efficient, much more efficient organization, and much more financially transparent, and trying to improve our bond rating, improve our credibility from a financial standpoint. And I think I've accomplished a lot of those things.
What did you mean by you don't plan on being here much longer?
Well, when I came into this job, I came in here for 2 weeks to help out.
Right.
And then I was pulled back in to help out.
Just when you try to get out, they pulled you back in. Yeah.
And I will tell you, I've been spending, 60, 70 hours every week working on this, because it was such a mess. And that's no fault on any individual. It was just the system that we had. The system had failed. And there's only so much energy one has to continue that process. I live in this community. I plan on my wife grew up in Situate for her whole life. We've been here almost 10 years. I plan on living here the rest of my life. And the rancor that has taken, it's tough.
Well,
it's
but
really
so
tough.
your current contract runs through
December.
through December. So
Yeah.
you're saying that you're not interested in staying on beyond the end of December?
I'm just not sure where my future is going to be from personally, where I want to be. Irrelevant of what happens with the Town Manager Act,
Right.
irrelevant of whether, the Board of Selectmen actually offered me a 2-year extension back in August. And, through some legal issues where the town council said, yes, you can do it, and then no, you can't, and then yes, you can, and no, you can't, they ended up providing a 6-month extension.
Right.
So, there's been some issues that
So
have
you,
happened.
you really don't know whether you'd want to stay on or not? You haven't made that decision?
I
or-
have not made that decision.
What do you-
I care about this community. I will always be involved in this community. It's just me as Michael, as a husband and as a father of 2 children, where do I want to be in the community that I live in, going forward?
2 questions. So do you think if the opposite happens and town meeting becomes a vote of approval for you, that'll change your mind?
Tough question. Tough question. I don't have the answer for you on that.
Okay, and then the second one is, talk about this rancor. I hear that one of our selectmen, he's not running because he just doesn't want to deal with it because it's just so tough. Talk about what's going on.
When you didn't have a lot of structure as to how things were run, and a lot of things were being done unsupervised, side deals were being done, and you come in and you start to provide, legal reform to make sure that everything follows the procurement process, everything has to be signed off on, every purchase order has to be approved so that you know where the money's going. When you have the new software up and running so you can actually manage a department. And then you start to see inefficiencies in the town, and you start to make changes for those. Every time you make a change is difficult, but our town needs change. And with the Board of Selectmen's support, the finance committees and so forth, we've been making changes. But every time we make a change, someone is on the opposite side of that change, and it's not because we've done anything to harm that individual, it's just that it's a different environment. And I go back to the union negotiations. Things were being made up that we were going to fire all the firemen, and we were going to have the policemen come in as public safety officers and run the community. And as one of the firemen stated, that he over-embellished that and said it was a far-reaching opportunity that I never said was going to happen. Now all of a sudden you get the state unions that are coming down to Cohasset, and they're saying, well, why are you doing that? I'm like, doing what? We're going in here and we're providing some additional training for our police and fire. I personally still believe it's good for the police department, who are first responders that can get there between 5 and 10 minutes faster than the fire department, depending upon what town, for them to be an EMT. If they want to take the time and be an EMT, I think it's a low-cost solution for the town to pay them another $1,000 just to maintain their license to get the training, because they may save a life during that time period. And my point being is, when you went to those type of items and you started to have that being exaggerated and things being made up, it's difficult for the Board of Selectmen and everyone who's trying to work on behalf of the long-term success of the community to figure out what the final outcome is going to be. Another case in point is we went out and we brought in a new auditor to come in, and we did a whole CAFR report, which is a top-level auditing report. Came back with a great review on this. Yes, we have some problems, but it addressed the progress that we had. We had the same auditor for 20-some years. Things were not being taken care of. We went out and we had a management review done by the Department of Revenue, who comes in and does municipal management reviews. As part of their analysis, they came back and said that we should assess the current roles and responsibilities of people in the town hall that are doing jobs. They may be in positions that they're not qualified to do. So we went back and we started to say, okay, well, you're a long-term employee and we value your work, but we need you to change your title, because you're not doing the treasurer collector's work, you're doing payroll and benefits. And under state law, a treasurer collector needs to have the ability of doing the bonding and the authority, and needs to have certain certifications. So if we're going to call you that, but that's not what your expertise is, then we have a discrepancy. So some of the changes we were doing is recommending was trying to follow some of the DOR reports and others, saying, let's title people appropriately, not reduce their pay, not reduce anything, but just identify who's doing what. And people took that as a demotion, even though same pay, same benefits, but just by changing title, and it's just one of many examples that the rancor and the aggressiveness has just been a challenge. I think we're going to work our way through it, but it's not, for a community like ours that preaches anti-hate and anti-bullying. There's been an awful lot of that, let me tell you.
Mike, we're coming down to our last few minutes, and I want to get back to Article 8. Just real quickly, first of all, if Article 8 was voted down, then you would not be able to be appointed as a permanent town manager, correct? Or is there some doubt about that?
There's still a gray area on that.
Okay,
The board
town
could
council seems to be saying you can't, but maybe someone else would opine differently.
That's correct.
All right. You feel that the Article 8 is important for the town going forward. And you've indicated tonight that you are undecided whether, even if it passes, you'd be willing to extend your contract. You get a new contract past December. Are you considering it all? I think it's fair to say that there are going to be people, whether it should or shouldn't be a referendum on you, there are people that are going to vote on it based on whether they think you should be in or you shouldn't be. And again, right, wrong, or indifferent,
Sure.
I think that's just the realities of it. This may pass, it may not pass, nobody knows at this point. Were you thinking at all about making a decision before the town meeting? Because if your decision was, I am not interested in staying past December, then this article, I dare say, which you feel is important for the town, would pass, almost for sure. Have you thought about that, or is there any possibility of that?
I haven't really thought about that, because what I and my family decide to do is really our personal decision. This needs to happen irrelevant of me or anyone else in this position. It needs to happen for the Board of Selectmen as to how they're structured. So whether this passes or fails, I still have my own individual decisions that I have to make going forward. I'm proud of the work that we've done and accomplished. As you know, we do have a bunch of uncensored blogs around here that can take things to a different level. If we go back and look at where we were, 14 months ago, compared to where we are today, you will not have anyone in this community arguing that we have not made great success. Some may choose on how that happens, but I think the evidence is clear that we're a much better organized community from a structural standpoint than we were before.
Last question, meals, hotel tax, good idea, bad idea?
I think it's a good idea, and I say that because the majority of the money that will be coming in is from people having weddings and living in New Jersey, New York, and coming up here, for the summers and stuff.
We'll always take New Yorkers' money.
We will always take it, and if you look at all our towns around here have the same type of thing. It's a small percentage on the meals, but we're looking to really focus that money back into the facilities of the town, whether it's the new senior center or whether it's just our existing facilities, because we have a financial gap in those.
Mike, thanks very much for coming in and helping us work through the town warrant, and we'll see you on the 22nd.
Monday,
Great.
the 22nd.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be right back.
So, I got this new family, and I don't know what it is about this one, but she can't seem to put down that toy all day long. Tap, 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 tap. Oh, and she even talks to it. She talks to that more than she talks to him. What's up, bro? Nice shirt. Who's she talking to? Her mom? She talks to her mom a lot.
All right, and we are back. Well, okay, so that's kind of a quick overview of some of the big issues in the town warrant.
And the budget, which I got to say, Mike paints a very bright picture, it seems like, for the budget and that it corrected a lot of issues and problems that had gone undetected or untreated before. They're putting money away, they're doing projects. It sounds good.
Well, that's certainly what Mike is saying. I'm not sure that there's uniformity of opinion on that issue, but that's certainly what Mike has done, and Mike is certainly very proud of what he's accomplished. But I think the news, I think we made some news tonight.
I think we did.
Because Mike is, I think everyone has kind of assumed that he wants to stay on as a permanent town manager. And certainly if you take him at his word, which is no reason not to, I heard him say, not in so many words, but I don't need this abuse anymore. I've done what I've done, and maybe I'll move on. Maybe he's tired of running into people at Stop and Shop and at Shaw's and downtown, and just being kind of a little more invisible.
Yeah, well, and you got to say, I mean, there's been two sides, and obviously that means one side's right and one side's wrong. And
No, not necessarily. It could be somewhere in the middle, which is usually the case.
But you could also make a big mistake in the sense that, if you're taking the the thought that, he tried to get himself into this position and now he wants to stay, and he's manipulating that to happen through writing this article or pushing it through, whatever, when the fact is, no, he has done yeoman's work, done great things, and now, like you say, maybe not, might be able to go off to some other brighter place than Cohasset and do well and leave that behind at our loss.
Well, I think there is a segment of town that feels that way. There's a segment of town that would violently disagree with that.
Right.
And would be very happy to see Mike not here. My point is that I think everybody, no matter where you stand on Mike and the selectmen, it's not just Mike, it's the selectmen. I think the fact is that everyone assumed that Mike would want to get a contract as a permanent, because it's kind of hard to think to do another acting town manager after all this come January 1. I mean, the acting thing only works so long. Some people think it's gone much longer than it should have. Right. It's hard to imagine we continue on. So it feels like if you're not going to do a permanent as of January, then it's just not going to happen. And again, what I think both sides think always were kind of under the assumption that Mike wanted to stay on as permanent, and what he's telling us tonight is that that's not necessarily true. Right. And so that is interesting. I think, again, right or wrong, a lot of people, when they vote on that article, it's a referendum on Mike and the Board of Selectmen. And will it go down like its predecessor, which was only a piece of it, and narrow piece just dealing with Mike's issue? Who knows? But I think it is, a lot of it is going to be a referendum. And as I said to Mike, I think if he were, and certainly it's a very personal decision, you got to think about your family and so forth, you shouldn't be rushing to these things, it's about your career. But if he were to come out before town meeting and said, an LBJ kind of, I will not be a candidate, I think that article will pass in a heartbeat. If he doesn't, 6.5 pick him.
It's going to be interesting. Just like I think all those issues are going to just boil right into the selectmen's race, which, we'll be interviewing all the candidates and getting their points of view on all these different issues in the shows ahead. But is that a referendum, too, of two sides coming, looking for power and getting voted in onto the Board of Selectmen, either to change it or to keep it as is?
Well, I think again, Mike, right or wrong, I think again, there's the selectman race is going to be a referendum on him. I think it's pretty clear that you have 3 candidates who support Mike and would vote, if they're able to, him in as a permanent town manager, and you have 2 that would not. And so I think and whether 1 or 2 kind of try to finesse that issue, everybody knows where they stand on that. And so I think that will be an issue. And again, wouldn't it be interesting if Mike had, before the election, said, I'm not interested? That would put an entirely different dynamic, I think, on the selectman race. But again, I can't blame the guy. This is about his career and about his family,
Sure.
and there's no reason that he should feel rushed into making that decision. But I think it would be a very different selectman's race if he had.
Right. Well, we've got about 2 weeks to go. Today being filmed on the 4th of April, and then the town meeting coming up on the 22nd. So we shall see.
So be sure to continue to watch. Again, we should have plenty of shows, and just putting more and more on as we get closer to town meeting and to the into the election. And we do this all so people can be well informed when they go to town meeting, when they go to the ballot box, rather than listening to rumors and innuendo and so forth around town. Listen to the candidates, judge them yourselves, and make your decision on how to vote for them and how to vote at town meeting. And we hope to help out that process.
Yep. So keep watching, and we'll be bringing those shows.
For now, I'm Mark DeGiacomo for Pat Martin. Good night.